Israel carried out a strike against what it says was Hamas's leadership in Doha, the capital of Qatar. According to Hamas, Israel failed to kill any senior officials in the group while acknowledging the deaths of 5 lower-ranked members along with a Qatari security guard. The attack marked a stunning extension of the Netanyahu government's campaign against Hamas and risked upending any negotiations aimed at ending the war and releasing the remaining hostages. CGTN's Jonathan Regev has more in this report from Tel Aviv.
Which member of the top Hamas leadership is alive and who is dead? Is any top negotiator still alive? These are questions that currently cannot be answered. It may take days, maybe even weeks, until this question may have a concrete answer. One thing is certain, though. Qatar is no longer a safe haven for the Hamas leadership, as all of those top leaders may have been thinking. Israel sends a very clear message that even in Qatar, which is one of the biggest U.S. allies in the region, home to the biggest American base in the Middle East, and a top negotiator in the conflict between Israel and Hamas, even there, the Hamas leadership is not safe. Israel did not only carry out the attacks, but minutes after it already sent out a clear message taking responsibility. There was no policy of ambiguity, as many times happens in these cases. Israel was quick to assume responsibility. First of all, claiming that Israel is the one behind the attack, but also saying that Israel acted on its own in order to make sure that the United States is not seen as someone who has been involved in this action. We already know now that the United States has been notified. It was cleared from the White House, but Israeli and American officials are saying, yes, the United States was aware of the attack, but did not participate in the attack. And now comes the question of what comes next. If really the top negotiators from Hamas, if really the top leadership of Hamas is no longer with us, the question which is now being asked by hostage families and supporters is, who do you negotiate with? There's still 48 hostages in Gaza. 20 of them are believed to be alive. Who do you negotiate with in order to secure their release if all of the top leadership is gone? Many in Israel believe that Israel carried out this attack now at this time in order to make sure that the American proposal that is on the table, which Hamas leaders may have been convening in order to perhaps agree with, does not happen, does not take place. And that means that currently, if all the Hamas leadership is gone, there are 48 hostages in Gaza and no one on the Hamas side to negotiate with. Jonathan Regev, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
Joining us now is Alon Pinkas. He served as Israeli Consul General in New York and Foreign Policy Advisor to former Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Alon, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Alon. Good to be with you again.
Israel says this was a precise or targeted strike on leaders of Hamas who are based in Qatar. The question is, why now? Because Hamas has been a group that Israel has been negotiating with over the past 2 years, negotiating through intermediaries, but it has been talking to Hamas. So why strike now?
The only reasonable explanation would be that this was intended to derail ceasefire talks. Here's the thing. The people who were targeted, whose fate I still don't know because there are conflicting reports about what happened to them, let's assume that these people deserve to die. Okay, that these people are legitimate targets, certainly after October 7th, 2023. So why wait 2 years? You knew where they are. The same logic of striking in Doha, the capital of Qatar, was the logic that was relevant in 2023, 2024, and throughout 2025. So the only reason is that in lieu of a military operation in Gaza, this was intended to deny Hamas of any kind of leadership that could negotiate. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's a counterintuitive type of argument, but the official explanation that Israel gave, according to which Hamas took responsibility for the terror attack yesterday in Jerusalem, that murdered 6 Israeli citizens. And because of that, Israel had to retaliate. This is nonsensical. Israel is retaliating in Gaza every day. Israel is retaliating in the West Bank every day. Why fly 3,600 kilometers back and forth to Qatar, of all places, to hit 2 guys? So the reason, the only logical explanation on is that this was meant to create chaos in the negotiations.
So if this was indeed intended to deny Hamas of any leadership and also derail any ceasefire negotiations, Alon, what's the alternative for Israel?
There is no alternative. That's the tragedy of this war, and that is why it has been protracted so much since October 7, 2023. By mid-2024, around May or June 2024, Israel effectively and essentially attained all the military goals it had set in terms of decimating, degrading Hamas, eviscerating entire neighborhoods that hosted Hamas in Gaza City and in the south of the Gaza Strip in the city of Rafah. From then on, the war has been extended periodically by Mr. Netanyahu for political reasons. And throughout that entire period, Anand, Israel was glaringly missing an end game, a get-out strategy, a post-war vision, any kind of political framework to replace that Hamas. So the same rationale that led Israel to fight a war, which was a just war to begin with, but then again was prosecuted in ways that drew a lot of legitimate criticism. The same logic that prevented Israel from coming out with an alternative throughout 2024 and until mid-2025 exists today. The only alternative is to stop the war and get some kind of an interim temporary Arab force into Gaza to provide essential and fundamental and very basic governance services so reconstruction can start, so humanitarian aid could go in, and Israel would pull out. But Israel doesn't want to pull out. Well, this government does not want to pull out, so the war is being extended, and there is no alternative deliberately in order to prolong the war.
Right, now, Alon, this also raises questions on how Israel decided that it was going to do this. Was this well thought out? Because it struck a sovereign state, a state that is not hostile towards Israel, a state that is also a close ally of Israel's main benefactor, the United States. In fact, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says this attack was a violation of Qatar's sovereignty. Others, including Qatar itself, says this is a violation of international law.
Yeah, look, Qatar is not just a U.S. ally. It is also designated since 2022 as a major non-NATO ally. It hosts a huge American air base, El Udeid Air Force Base, with 10,000 personnel. It has been the mediator since the beginning of the war to get Israeli hostages back. In fact, Qatar was complicit in Israel's attempts to leave Gaza alone, thereby, and by extension, strengthening Hamas by funneling funds into Gaza per Israel's request and through Israeli vetting. So the decision to hit Qatar, the capital city of Doha, 2 years after the war began, and I go back to my first point, Alon, if these people deserve to die, and let's assume that they did because of what they have done and who they are, then why did you not do this in October 23, November, December, January 24, so on? Not only is it an American ally, but I think it undermines Qatar's role as a mediator, and in fact, and indeed, they suspended their mediation role and position for the time being. And it goes back to the point that I made. If you really want to undermine any ceasefire talks, you hit the negotiators and you hit the mediators, which is what Israel did here.
Well, Qatar says this was a violation of international law. Do you expect Israel to face any repercussions for this?
Not really. I mean, look, international law is an important thing, but it's not exactly enforceable because there's no global government or no global police force or no global means and a mechanism to enforce that law, unlike within a sovereign country. The only repercussions that I could see, again, and this is hypothetical, is if the U.S. Develops some kind of a disappointment, disillusionment, and anger with Israel over this attack.
Alon, as an international diplomat, and you've worked on the front lines of this job. You worked in New York as Consul General. Are you concerned that the entire system, the entire legal system that was put in place after World War II to maintain order in the world is collapsing?
Absolutely. There are two ways of looking at it. One is to look at its collapse and say, where is the alternative? What is the substitute? And the second is to look at the main culprit for this disintegration of the system, or this unraveling of the system, and that is the U.S., unfortunately. The U.S. built this post-1945 so-called Pax Americana, the so-called rules-based world. There were some things that were unfair in this structure, if you think 80 years later. The fact that China and India are not more recognized by this system, and the fact that Japan and Germany, the defeated powers of World War II, are not members of the Security Council, but Britain and France are, obviously is a relic of 1945. But what we see now is very dangerous because the U.S., for better or for worse, with mistakes, but with good intentions, depending on how you view it, the U.S. not only set the priorities, the U.S. was the ultimate arbiter of conflicts. And yes, there's a lot to criticize about America's role in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but there was also no substitute for America since the Soviet Union collapsed and in the early 90s, and we were looking at a unipolar world.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's the ascension of China, which is a very significant phenomenon. But right now, you see this in Gaza, you see it vis-a-vis Iran, you saw it today as we are discussing in Qatar, you see it with the Russians in Ukraine. You see a complete glorification of violence, complete disregard for rules, and no one power stands up and says, at least says, gentlemen, this is wrong. No one is saying that.
We are getting reports that the White House has now rebuked Israel for this action, and the White House has also assured Qatar that it will not happen again.
Well, there you go. Look, this could be just, paying lip service. Oh, well, we didn't know. We'll condemn the Israelis. Don't worry, it won't happen again. Okay, that's one way of looking at it, but that sure doesn't alleviate the fears that you correctly raised. Should allies feel that they're being protected by the U.S. or even supported by the U.S.? The second possibility is what I just spoke about, that the U.S. was surprised by this. Yes, the technical notification came in time via military channels, CENTCOM, and so on. But no, the White House did not know, and no, there was no political pre-notification. That's a possibility.
Alon, Pinkas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anand. Good to be with you.
Well, there's much more to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Michael Maloof served as a senior Pentagon strategic analyst. Also with us is Yossi Mekelberg. He is a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. And Khalil Sayegh is a political analyst and the co-founder and president of the Agora Initiative. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Khalil Sayegh, let me start with you. So Israel attacks this property in the Qatari capital, Doha. Qatar says this is a violation of international law. The United Nations Secretary General says it is a violation of Qatari sovereignty. 6 people murdered in Qatar by Israel. What's your response to what happened there?
To start with, this is not the first violation of international law or sovereignty of Israel's neighbors. For decades, Israel has violated the sovereignty of Lebanon, Syria, and other states historically too. There have been attacks on Tunisia and obviously Iran, other nations as well. But this is, I think, unprecedented in the sense that it happened in a Gulf state, in a country that's not considered an enemy state of Israel, a country that's, as mentioned before, an ally of the U.S. and major non-NATO ally. So that's an unprecedented attack. It's definitely a big hit for Hamas, for its leadership to be targeted, and a sense that they don't feel safe anymore in Qatar is also a big hit. Until now, we don't know if Hamas's leadership is affected or not. Hamas has denied that any of them have been harmed and that they claim that they survived, but Hamas has made many claims before that their leadership were survived and they weren't. For example, when Hamad al-Daif was assassinated in Gaza, Hamas has claimed for months that he's alive and well, and then it turns out that Daif is not alive. Same with Mohammed Sinwar and others. So my reaction is this is obviously unprecedented, and we have to wait and see when it comes to Hamas's leadership.
Yossi Mekelberg, it seems as if this was telegraphed by Israel. Here is what the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said last weekend. This was before the attack. Let's listen.
We are eliminating terrorist infrastructures. We are eliminating criminal terrorist leaders. And we have established another humanitarian space to allow the civilian population in Gaza to leave for a safe place and also to receive humanitarian assistance there. Hamas is trying to do everything to prevent them from leaving and to remain there so that they can serve as a human shield for them. Our effort in Gaza on the last strongholds, actually the last important stronghold, Gaza City, is part of our effort to complete the crushing of the Iranians' Axis chokehold. This axis is essentially intended to destroy the state of Israel, and by dismantling and damaging it, we are removing another existential threat to Israel, the primary threat on Israel.
So, Yossi, what do you believe was Israel's motive in conducting this attack against Qatar?
I think we can look at it in different ways. One, it's the continuation of Israel war on Hamas from October 7 in 2023. The only consistent element in Israel policy that it says in Netanyahu's policy is that it would eliminate Hamas, its leadership and the organization as an organization. But I think in this specific case, it was an attack on a ceasefire deal. I don't think that Netanyahu and his government are interested in a ceasefire deal. They can claim as much as they like that releasing the hostages is a priority. I think by now, very few in Israel believe that this is the case. Definitely the families of the hostages don't believe this is the case. The chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, when the cabinet decided on entering Gaza City, said that this is going to put the hostages at risk. It's also the military suffer from fatigue, and obviously entering into urban areas will mean many more civilians killed, or again, in violation of international law, displacing probably another million people from Gaza. So if this is the case, it's not about the survival of the hostages, it's about the political survival of Netanyahu. You know, in these days, he appears in court, or supposedly is to appear in court in his corruption trial, but there is always a reason for him to delay, postpone his appearance in court, and that's what he's trying to do, to get somehow to the election, and either he wins it, or in the process also get pardoned by the president, or derail the corruption trial altogether.
Michael Maloof, earlier, just before the attack, there were reports that from the Israeli media, or just after the attack, I should say, that it was President Trump who had greenlit this attack. But then there was a social media posting on Trump's social media site, Truth Social, in which he said, "This was a decision by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was not a decision made by me." Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. What do you make of that American response?
It happened after the attack. I think the president was trying to cater to the Qataris in order to show that they had nothing to do with it, when in fact Trump just last week said that he was giving Hamas a final warning. Secondly, the United States has controls the air in that area. It could see when Israel launched its aircraft where it was heading. They can monitor any and everything throughout the Middle East. They have the technology for that. And given the fact that we have the largest base in the Middle East in Qatar, the United States would be very, very mindful and of any approaching aircraft, and knew that the ID of those aircraft would be Israeli. And you also had the UK. They had aircraft in the air as well. So they were complicit in this, in knowing that Israel had launched, and that they were heading in that direction toward Qatar. So they could have stopped it at any time, but did not. So I think that this is going to have some repercussions with the Qataris, and perhaps even with the other Arab countries throughout the Middle East as a consequence, in being able to trust the United States on any agreements. But I think clearly the White House had the ability to see what was going to be happening, chose to do nothing, and allowed the attack to occur. And this just demonstrates once again politically that Netanyahu basically controls Trump.
When you say there are going to be repercussions, of course, there is that question of whether these Gulf states will trust the United States again. But what other repercussions are you talking about, particularly from the Qataris?
Well, I believe the Qataris were involved in the Abraham Accords, and I think that this could have some impact in terms of being able to work with the Israelis in the future, and certainly to be a mediator in any of these discussions in the future. During the Vietnam War, we sat down in Paris with Hanoi negotiators all that time, and never once did we seek to kill the negotiators. And this is to get to your original point earlier in the program. The international law has now been set on its ear as a consequence. Israel has violated every international norm when it comes to diplomacy, and other countries will point to this now as precedent to do it themselves in the future. This is going to be some of the fallout from here on as a result. We saw Israel attack a diplomatic mission, for example, in Syria, which launched the Iranians to attack, ultimately to attack Israel itself. So we're seeing Israel taking the lead on all of this. The United States is doing nothing. I think it's because Trump's contributors have demanded that he follow Israel and allow Israel to do what it wants to do. And on top of all that, we see Smotrich and Ben-Gvir wanting to do this. Otherwise, if they walk from that government, Netanyahu's government falls. But from the Qatari standpoint, I think, and I also would point out to the Egyptians themselves, they are fed up with the Israelis in terms of negotiation, because Israel wants to take over Gaza, and Egypt does not want that to happen.
Yeah. Khalil Sayegh, last week Hamas accepted proposals for the release of the remaining Israeli hostages, as well as for the release of the thousands of prisoners, Palestinians, that Israel is holding. Many of them have been tortured in Israeli prisons as well. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected that, calling it Hamas spin and nothing new. So do you think at any time were the Israelis negotiating in good faith? I mean, is there still a negotiating process left?
Do I think they negotiated in good faith? No, absolutely no. There has been deals on the table for the Israelis since day one, since October 2023, and they've rejected these deals over and over again. I think that the Israeli goal in Gaza were very clear. They wanted to get rid of the Palestinians. They wanted the destruction of the Palestinian people. And they saw October 7th and its aftermath as an opportunity to completely genocide the Palestinians, and if possible, ethnic cleanse them to Egypt, something that they failed to do so far. I think that Netanyahu is not really interested in a ceasefire that would allow any type of Palestinian self-government in Gaza. And that don't take my words for it, take his words. He's saying that we wouldn't allow a Hamas government in Gaza, nor a Palestinian government in Gaza. So if you don't want neither of those, what do you want? He wants a forever war in Gaza that would never allow a Palestinian self-government in Gaza, nor it would allow for any potential peace and two-state solution.
Yossi Mekelberg, Israel has ordered a complete evacuation of Gaza City. That's one of the most populous urban areas in the besieged enclave. Now that it appears that Prime Minister Netanyahu has abandoned negotiations, he doesn't want a ceasefire. What is Israel's goal there? Is it to either kill all the Palestinians left there or push them out?
I think if you see what people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir say, and the way that the war has been conducted over the last 2 years, we see it, and even the plan, so-called plan that came recently to light about rebuilding Gaza, a modern AIC, but it's all of it without basically the Palestinians.
Yeah.
So I don't think Israel wants to kill all of the Palestinians, but the current Israeli government would like most of them to move outside Gaza, which, needless to say, it's in violation of international law. It's a war crime. And when they talk about voluntary migration, there is no voluntary migration because the people of Gaza are not interested in leaving Gaza. They made the life of Gazan people impossible and then push them outside Gaza and then talk over the territory.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Alon in Washington.